Hey folks, we're going to get started in just a minute with the holiday ribbon loom woven cuff. Woohoo! Well, hello there. I'm Leslie Rogalski, Creative Director for the Beadsmith, here on this fall Wednesday, November 22nd. And I hope everybody's doing great and is excited about another loom project. Yes, I did one recently. I really like weaving on the loom. It just gives a very satisfying bead fabric. So this is what we're going to show you today. It's a very basic loom weaving, and I had a couple people mention that they had never loomed before, and I wasn't going to get into the actual process, but I think I'm going to include how to warp the loom and a little bit of weaving for you. But basically, you're weaving skinny little strips, one at a time, on the Beadsmith loomies, like the one I used a couple weeks ago with that lovely glimmery cuff that I made. All right, so we're going to use the loom, the loomies, and you're going to do 3 separate strips. I've measured the design so that they fit side by side inside our elegant bead slide clasps. So you have this absolutely lovely cuff, and when you wear it, there's a little bit of movement in it because you have the 3 bands coming together in this really clean, professional finish. Beautiful for the holidays, traditional colors here in the States, red, green, gold, and a pearly white. And then for Hanukkah or winter solstice, festival of lights, I have a nice sparkly blue and white and silver, different shades of blue. I see some hearts. Thank you very much. Some likes. Yes, really fun. Fun to make. The tutorial gives you both the color chart and a step-by-step for the repeat. So here's the Christmas colors, and you can see that I also have the row by row. Each band is done separately. So the left band, this one, is going to give you the row by row for the repeat, and then you just start over from row 2, which it tells you in the text. There's the blue and silver and white pattern. And I do include instructions on, we have some tips for you. We also walk you through the warping and the weaving. So what I'm going to demo for you first is how to start with the warping, and then we're going to do a little bit of weaving, and we'll talk about how to finish it for the bead slide clasp, which doesn't need to have all those little warp ends woven in. It's just really a lot easier than that. So let's get started. Materials for this are various colors of delicate size 11s, a beading needle. I use size 11 sort of as a general for small beads. You can use 12 if you feel the 11 isn't facile enough for you. S-Line Fire 6-pound to both warp the loom and to use for weaving. A scissors or a thread zap, one of my all-time favorite tools. A little hypo cement, which you're going to use for the knotted ends, and I'll show you that in a little bit. All right, let's get started. The loomies comes apart. You have to put it together. So here's what we have. we have the sides of the loom and the ends of the loom, and you'll notice on one side there's a peg on one side of each end, the headboard, sometimes headboard and footboard they're called. Your warp grooves or notches or warp coil that the threads will go through and they'll come around and loop around the peg. So these just fit right into the slots like this. And you want to make sure that that little peg is facing out, and you're going to do the same thing to the other side. One of the things I really like about this little pink loom, the Loomies, is that it's so lightweight. And you'll see later as I get into warping this that I'm actually going to be turning the loom around like this. So it's just so light and nice. You want to make sure that the headboard and footboard are sturdy in the notches, just like that. So this loom does not have any way for you to tighten the warp threads once you weave them. So what you want to do is make sure that you're pulling and giving a nice tension to it as you warp this. Warping the loom, you work from the spool of thread. Don't cut anything off yet. And you're going to take the end and you're going to tie it around either end of the loom, either peg. And I'm just going to tie this in a little couple half hitches. And I think, whoops, I think my cat just snuck into my studio. All right. So all I'm doing is tying a half hitch and then making it another half hitch so you have a nice square knot on that little peg right there. And I'm going to tie one more half hitch because this can pull out if you're yanking on it. So you want to put this on here and give a tug to make sure that there's no sliding here in the knot. All right, now our loom patterns for each band is 7 beads across. 7 beads across each band. Oh, sorry, cat attack. Get out of there. All right. They are smart. All right, so 7 beads across, which means you have 8 warp threads because you need 1 on each side. So I'm going to start, doesn't matter which way you go or whether it's centered or not, but I'm going to pull my first thread over like this and pull it straight across, just kind of eyeballing it to the other side. And then you're going to wrap around the peg on the other side. And for the sides of this, to give it stability, you're going to double warp. See, I'm bringing the warp thread back into the same groove just for this side, and I'll do it for the other side. But now you're going to bring this around, pull it up this way, and bring the thread in the next warp. So now you have space for 1 bead. 2 warps, 1 bead. So I'm going to continue until I have 8 warps for my 7 beads. So you can see that there's 2 spaces in the between the warp threads. 3 warp threads, 2 spaces where the beads will go. And I'm going to bring it around, and you can see how, remember I said that this is, I really like how lightweight this is. So I can lift it up, and I'm pulling snugly on my warp thread as I go back and forth. So now I have space for 3 beads, 4 beads, and I just leave my spool of thread to kind of unroll as I'm working. Now what I'm doing is, as I'm pulling this, I'm also using my fingers to hold the warp thread snug against the footboard to bring it back so it doesn't loosen up. So let's see. I'm going to make sure I got that in the right one. So I have space for 5 beads, which means I have 6 threads, 6 beads, 7 threads, and my 8th warp is going to be the other side, so I'm going to double that around by bringing my warp thread back through and across to go in that same notch. Now at the other end is the tail where I started, right? So I'm going to wrap my warp thread a couple times around the peg and hold it, snip it, and then tie it to the little tail to tie off my warp. And I want to make sure I don't release my tension here. I know I'm off screen, sorry. There you go. So I'm just tying it together around that peg. And now we have a nice warp. It's got a nice tension. All right, so we're ready to start weaving. You want to cut a comfortable length of thread from your S on Fire. Yes, you can use other threads, but you want something without stretch. All right, so I'm just going to cut a piece of thread and grab one of my needles and my needle threading tip. I'm going to take a flat nose pliers and I'm going to squash the end of my thread to be flat because the eye of the needle is oblong, it's not round. And I'm going to bring my thread till it's just a little poppy seeds worth. Bring the needle to the thread, and the thread only has one place to go, which is through the needle, through the eye of the needle. There we go. And I'll pull this through. All right, as I'm doing the Facebook Live here, first thing we do is work from your non-dominant side to your dominant side. Now, I'm a righty, so I'm going to start my thread on the left, and I'm just going to tie a half hitch about an inch from the board, and I'm going to leave myself a little bit of a tail, just enough to kind of go around. That's going to get taken care of later. Now I'm going to bring my needle and thread under the warp. It would help if I poured out some beads, wouldn't it? So here's a lovely color. This is opaque royal blue luster that I'm using here. So I'm going to pick up 7 beads for the first row. And here's the thing. The first and last row in your cuff, and you can see it better here where I've finished off 2 of the 3 bands. The last row, first and last rows, get hidden inside the bead slide clasp tube. So there's a row of beads inside this tube, and then this is actually the second row. That's the first one showing from the chart. So that's a really handy thing. All right, so, but I have 7 delicas from my non-dominant side to my dominant side. This is my dominant hand, so I can control it, and I'm pulling the beads up. Your first row is always a little wonky because the warp is not being held in place. You want to push down with your non-dominant hand, down with your thumb and up with your pointer finger to pop 1 bead in between each thread. Okay, there you go. That's my first row. Now I'm holding it there by pushing up with my pointer finger and down with my thumb, giving it a little extra tension, right? Now I'm going to take my needle and keep my needle and thread over the warp. So you string under, sew through over, and I'm going to make sure that I sew through all of those beads, just taking my time, and make sure that it's over all the warps. And I'm going to pull my row snug. Remember, you always, when you're doing beadwork, you really want to try to pull your thread straight out of the bead hole. Not like this, not like this. You can see how it's pulled the row. Now I'm going to go back to my second row. I'll pour out some silver so you can see the difference in the rows. And I'm going to pick up, my needle and thread are under the warp. I'm going to pick up 7 beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And again, I'm going to pull them up to the warp from underneath, push down with my thumb and up with my index finger to pop those beads. Once you get that first row done, it's really so much easier. And I'm going to carefully sew through. Make sure the needle stays over the warp threads, especially the edges. That can really, you can forget. Now, if you miss a bead, it'll fall away. And what you want to do then is take your needle off your thread and carefully pull at the end warp until you can see a little loop. Can you see that little loop of thread there? And then you can pull it out, restring the bead that you missed, and because everything's still under your warp, and then you're going to be able to string back through. So you're going to do this, again, 1 strand at a time. I tried to do this by warping all 3 at once and everything got in the way. So learn from my R&D. You're going to do 1 at a time. Now, so you have your whole strand. You're going to cut them off. You're going to cut this once it's finished. You're going to cut right above the peg to free your piece from the loom. And you'll have a strip of beadwork like this on the loom. And then once it's cut, you're going to have ends. Some of your ends may be looped, so you want to go through with your scissors and you want to make sure that everything is an individual thread by cutting the loops. So you're going to have this. Now, you can see how I have knotted the end warp threads, trimmed them, and you can't see, but I will tell you that this is where the hypo cement comes in, and you're going to dab those little knots with glue and let it dry. And you're going to do that to both ends. So I'm going to show you, I left this last one so I could show you how you want to knot these in double square knots. So a half hitch, and another half hitch before you glue it. And you pair these off in 2s or 3s. You don't want the knot to be too big. So I'm going to take the first free warps on the side. And of course you have your might have 3 or 2 threads in one hand and 1 in the other. And you're just going to tie these in a knot and make sure that you bring it down to the bead. And then you're going to make another half hitch and a third half hitch to secure it like this. 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to trim it. Be careful you don't trim the others. I'm going to trim it to like about a 1/4 inch because I'm going to be able to snip it smaller later. All right. Now I'm going to take the 2 warp threads in the middle and I'm going to do the same thing. So you can see, because you have the nice sized tube that the ends are going in, you can do this with the knots. And you don't have to weave these back into a piece like you do for a lot of other loom work. All right, so that's 1, 2, 3. And trim it. And then the last set of knots, oh, it looks like I missed a thread. All right, pretend I didn't. I think I just missed snipping that off. It's knotted. There you go. Ah, that works. Okay, so now I have 4 threads left. So I'm going to just divide it into the 2 pairs and I'm going to knot 2 and 2. 1, 2, 3. All right, come on. There we go. So you can see that they're right up against that first row of beads. And I'm going to snip them off. Now you would dab these with glue, and after the glue's dried and the threads are a little harder, you can snip them a little shorter. But we're now going to, this is what we have now. All right, now I suggest that you leave the clasp closed with both pieces in here, just so you know that you're doing this in the right direction, because you want your bracelet to come and slide in this way. So I want you to look at the end of the clasp. You can see there's the little tube tunnel. You can see through it. And there's a little channel on the end that's going to allow for the thread rows. If that's too snug for you to fit your beads, you can take something like a scoop ease or a flat nose pliers, and you can run it along the ridge just a little bit, just to that little channel there, to open it up a little bit. All right, I really like using the scoopies. I put it in and just wiggle it, turn it a little bit, makes room. Okay, now this last strap is the one that goes in here, so that's the one you're going to slide in first. So I'm going to wiggle the last row through, all the way through. There we go. Whoops. Sorry, I didn't close the other side. That would help. There's a little trap door on both ends. Once you know which end is going to be the end that your first strap goes in, you can close this up. I have pretty strong fingers, so I closed it up by hand, but you can use a tool. You can press it on the table. All right, let's go back. Make sure that this is directionally right, and you're going to slide it in over the first row. I love these bead slides. They are so cool. All right, now your next one, and you're going to bring that around. All right, now if your little ends are too long, you can snip them off. All right, slide that in. Now bead slides come in several sizes and colors. This is the longest size at 29 millimeters. They're 10 millimeters wide, all the clasps. But there's two sizes smaller, and I'm not going to give you the numbers because I don't want to be incorrect. But this is the largest size. All right, there's the last one in there. Everything's nice and smooth, right? Now you have the little trap door right there. And I'm going to take my nylon jaw this time, and I'm going to show you how all I did is bend it in like that. And that's it, you guys. Now we have this beautiful bracelet. And while it may be a single clasp, because it has the 3 bands, it just gives it a little extra movement, a little extra texture in the design. And that's pretty much it. There's that. There's that. Ta-da! So let's see. I do not want to be remiss in thanking my partner in crime, the fabulous Leslie A. Pope, who is monitoring this for me. We are definitely the Team Leslie, or the Leslies as they call us at the Beadsmith. So, what do you guys think? Pretty cool, right? The loomies, the bead slides, the tutorial, which is on our beadsmith.com/I-love-beads. Free. And this is what the Loomies box looks like. You can go to look for it at your favorite bead reseller, where you will find all of these and other quality Beadsmith beads, tools, and supplies. This will appear on our YouTube channel and in a couple days, and you will find, here's the I Love Beads under Delicas for this pattern. Look for us also on Instagram. We try to get reels and some fun stuff up, and of course our Facebook page, the Beadsmith. So thank you so much for joining us. If you're watching us from outside the U.S., tomorrow is Thanksgiving, so probably everybody's houses are starting to smell really good as they cook to get together with family, or maybe they're having Friendsgiving, which a lot of people do. So again, thank you for joining us for this Facebook Live. I'm Leslie Rogalski here with Leslie Pope, and our fearless leader, Stephen Weiss, looks like he's tuning in too. Thanks, you guys. Happy Thanksgiving.